Now, while we're talking about the justice system in Victoria, how is it that we have a father convicted of sexually abusing his 5-year-old daughter now serving time in a women's prison? Well, the father identifies as female. Corrections Victoria, bless their bureaucratic hearts, state that, and I quote, "A person should be imprisoned in the prison of their gender rather than their sex assigned or assumed at birth." So if you say you're female, you get to bunk in with the ladies. Never mind biology, anatomy, or the safety of anyone around you. And they have the height to call themselves the Corrections Department. Perhaps they should start with correcting themselves. But here's the contradiction. Corrections Victoria also acknowledge that sometimes, just sometimes, they might need to ignore the gender identity rule if an inmate, and I quote, might pose safety risks to others, particularly if their criminal record indicates a history of sexual and/or physical violence. So, wait on a second, which is it? Is a man identifying as a woman suddenly not a woman if he has a history of sexual and/or physical violence? That wouldn't make sense. But nor would putting people the state has declared to be women into men's prisons. And see, that's the problem with gender fluid ideology. The clue is in the name. It's fluid. And it's fluid because it's not based on anything solid like biology or even common sense. The case in Victoria is horrific. A 25-year-old father made videos and took photographs of himself sexually abusing his daughter to send to a pedophile in America for his viewing pleasure. And when he was found guilty, the Victorian judge worried that the offender would, quote, face additional hardship in prison as a relatively young trans woman. Well, pass the violins. That a judge would spend even a moment to worry about the feelings of a person who sexually abused a 5-year-old, well, that is obscene. Yes, a child has been traumatised, but I can't imagine the hardships you'd face as a sexual predator who identifies as trans. Spare me. Numerous women's organisations have demanded an explanation as to why this sexual offender, who hasn't even had sex change surgery, is in a women's prison. Danica DiGiorgio and I spoke to Women's Forum Australia CEO Rachel Wong about this very case a week ago.
Now, I note that you have written specifically to the Allen government on this matter. What are you calling for, and have you had a response?
That's right. So we just wrote to them at the end of the last week. We wrote to the Premier, the Corrections Minister, the Minister for Women, and we have asked them to remove this man from the prison, to explain how we got there in the first place, to reassess their policies, and to make sure that this never happens again. Now, look, I'm not holding my breath because we did the same thing in 2022 and the Corrections Minister basically just affirmed the policy and ignored our concerns. We also wrote to the Human Rights Commission then as well, both at the state and federal level. Both of them said they have no power to do anything, which begs the question, who does have the power to look after the rights of female prisoners? It's just absolutely insane.
Well, it's lucky Rachel Wong hasn't been holding her breath, because a week later, I'd like to be able to give you the government's explanation, except the Victorian government has gone into hiding on this one. Premier Jacinta Allen, who's never shy of a microphone, is suddenly nowhere to be found. This story, as I said, was first reported a week ago by Danica and I, and despite repeated requests, not a single comment offered by Jacinta Allen. Which is funny, isn't it? Because when the Australian newspaper reported that school children were being taught gender fluidity as part of a so-called respectful relationships program, Jacinta Allen couldn't wait to get in front of a microphone.
In response to the ongoing perpetration of violence against women, we have expanded the Respectful Relationships program.
If she's so concerned about the perpetration of violence against women, why is she mute on a male sex offender serving time in a female prison? Well, I'll tell you why. Because once you start tying your shoes in gender ideology, the laces come undone and reality trips them up every single time. And that's Victoria, a state that prioritises identity politics over logic, ideology over safety, and headlines over humanity. A place where the fantasy of fluidity trumps the reality of crime, and the people most in need of correction are the Department of Corrections. And a warning for Jacinta Allen. A case similar to this led to the demise of Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. It all came crashing down for Sturgeon when she repeatedly refused to acknowledge that Isla Bryson, a transgender offender serving time in a women's prison for raping 2 women, was actually a man. If voters can't trust you to tell the truth about basic biology, why should they trust you on anything? But I simply have to show you these remarks from Nicola Sturgeon when asked recently to reflect upon that case of the man in a women's prison after raping 2 women. Have a listen to this.
I think what I would say now is anybody who commits the most heinous male crime against women probably forfeits the right to be, the gender of their choice.
They forfeit to be the gender of their choice. That's quite. I mean, this actually goes to the heart of the difficulty around this.
That probably was not the best phrase to use. But
they forfeit their right to be the gender of their choice.
If you rape a woman, then I think you probably the debate about whether they should be called a woman or not probably.
Well, why don't you simply say that Isla Bryson is a biological male?
They are a biological male, but that's about whether it gets back into the self-ID thing. I should have been much more straightforward. I wasn't. But that's because of the debate. We'd lost all sense of rationality in this debate.
These people are insane. And these are the people running our countries. People who pick and choose when someone is a woman and when they're not, while accusing us of being the ones who've lost all sense of rationality. I tell you what, if Jacinta Allen can't come out and say that a biological man is a man, no matter how he identifies, and that a man doesn't belong in a female prison, well, then it defies rationality that she would ever be re-elected.